Nuremberg trials were a revolutionary achievement for international law. They officially adopted the ideas of crimes against humanity and war crimes.
Although some people discount the Nuremberg trials as a failed attempt at law, most people saw it as a momentous step in the correct direction. The grave responsibility of justice. How the Nuremberg trials created international law.
Including the extermination of over 6 million Jewish people. When World War II was over, many wanted to execute these criminals.
Even Winston Churchill himself said, "I would take no responsibility for a trial, even though the US wants to do it. Execute the principal criminals as outlaws."
Even though many people opposed the idea of the Nuremberg trials, the four major Allied powers, the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France, came together to form the International Military Tribunal, which is also known as the IMT.
After it was announced that there was going to be an international trial of Nazi leaders, global leaders wanted to know how the criminals would be tried.
The public wanted a flashy show that would come with a cross-examination. However, Chief Prosecutor Robert H. Jackson was a strong advocate for using Nazi legal documents and signatures.
Having to adjust to the American legal system was a major challenge for the foreign defense lawyers to overcome.
In total, there were 4 chief prosecutors, one from each of the countries in the IMT.
Robert H. Jackson represented the U.S. in the Nuremberg trials. He was an advocate for treating the Nazis on trial fairly. Sir Hartley Shawcross represented the UK in the trials.
France was originally represented by Francois de Menthon, but in 1946 he resigned and was replaced by August Schempeter de Riba. General Roman Rudenkow represented the USSR.
That 4 great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason.
The trial prosecutors came across the problem defendants were using superior orders to determine criminals' guilt. Almost every Nazi crime originated from higher orders, normally leading back to Hitler.
The prosecutors decided that the superior orders defense could only be allowed to reduce a sentence, not to determine if a person was guilty.
As Sir Hartley William Shawcross said, "There comes a point where a man must refuse to answer to his leader if he is also to answer to his conscience."
The jurisdiction for the Nuremberg trials was crimes against peace, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, which were virtually unheard of before the Nuremberg trials.
21 of the surviving Nazi leaders were tried, not including Hitler himself. Holding a trial in absentia for Hitler was debated, but a trial was never held because world leaders were afraid it would spread rumors that Hitler was still alive.
7 German organizations were also on trial. Some of these organizations include the Reich Cabinet, the Gestapo, and the General Staff and High Command of the German military.
When news of the Nuremberg trials came out, many German citizens reacted with aversion. Some even felt that the Allies used victor's justice and didn't give Germany a say in the trials, which was partially true.
Many criticized the Allies for condemning people on trial for crimes they were guilty of themselves. Others complained that Nazi defendants could not appeal their convictions.
Although the Nuremberg trials did have their flaws, they were still a remarkably fair application of justice.
On the other hand, the American public expressed a largely favorable opinion about the Nuremberg trials, believing the Nazis got what they deserved.
Many of the people on trial were Nazi physicians who conducted cruel and inhuman experiments on prisoners in concentration camps.
The trials of Nazi physicians are sometimes called the doctor's trials. Before the doctor's trials, no law distinguished between legal and illegal human experimentation.
Out of this came the Nuremberg Codes, which were a baseline for how doctors should treat their patients. Over 16 of the doctors on trial were found guilty. 7 were put to death.
The 11th Nuremberg trial was the Ministry's case. It was the second longest trial, which lasted for over 11 months. It focused on trying those who were state secretaries and high members of the Nazi Party.
The ninth case was the Einsatzgruppen case. The trial started with 24 defendants, and after the trial, 14 were sentenced to death, 2 got life sentences, and 5 got 10 to 20 years of prison. The prosecutor for this trial was Ben Ferenc.
The last trial was the High Command case. The 14 defendants were staff officers or leading command in the German armed forces. The trial lasted from February 5, 1958, until August 13th.
During the High Command case, one of the defendants committed suicide. 9 were sent to prison for 3 to 20 years, and the other 2 were sent to prison for life.
After approximately 3 years, the Nuremberg trials were finally over.
In 8 months, a short time as state trials go, we have introduced evidence which embraces as vast and varied a panorama of events as has ever been compressed within the framework of a litigation. It is impossible, in summation, to do more than outline with bold strokes the vitals of this trial's mad and melancholy record, which will live as the historical text of the 20th century's shame and depravity.
If the Nuremberg trials never happened, the most likely other option would have been holding a summary hearing and executing all of the Nazi leaders, which would have an enormous setback for the legal system.
International law would not exist until a much later date if not for the Nuremberg trials. The Tokyo War Crimes trials, which were modeled after the Nuremberg trials, were held from May 3, 1946 to November 12, 1948.
They tried high military and political officials, and it ended in 7 executions, as well as 16 life sentences. War criminals would be executed with no question as to whether they were guilty or not before Nuremberg happened.
The Nuremberg trials paved the way for future international tribunals, including trials in former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, which surrounded the ideas of addressing genocide instead of letting high officials go without punishment.
We believe that the Nuremberg trials were successful in implementing international law because the Nuremberg trials showed that world leaders could be held accountable for crimes against humanity and war crimes.
By establishing international law, the Nuremberg trials subsequently saved many people's lives by establishing a precedent for administering justice for international crimes against humanity.